Thank you, Tony. That was really, it's a great project and so innovative. Now, we can take questions to Tony. So if people could write their questions in the chat, we've got a couple already. One from Virginia Bear. Virginia, can you unmute and ask your question to Tony, please?
Hi, Tony. I was actually interested in a merchant banker's opinion on this one. Clearly, we're not quite there yet with how we value the big scrub and other native ecosystems. And I'm wondering, Tony, if you have an idea on why that is and whether it's going to change anytime soon.
Look, I think the environment politically and generally, if you go back to the days of Kevin Rudd and his Caring for Our Country program, the environment was at the top of the political agenda. And it was probably relatively easy then to sell the concept of the importance of the environment. But if you cast your mind back over the last 30 years, we hear more and more and more about Australia's extinction crisis, but that doesn't seem to galvanise the politicians. In this area, a significant proportion of the community have moved here because of the beautiful environment, and the most gorgeous part of that environment and most valuable is critically endangered lowland subtropical rainforest, because that's, as we all know, it's directly descended from the Gondwana rainforest that covered most of Australia 40 million years ago, and it's unique in the world. So we have, over the last 22 years, as Tim referred to, run an event called the Big Scrub Rainforest Day, and we have attracted about more than 25,000 community members to that event. So in this area here, I think we've been quite successful. We've got thousands of followers on Facebook and the other digital media platforms. So I think here there is a growing and already widespread awareness of the unique value of this ecosystem and its critically endangered status. So I think we all have to proselytize in the general community to raise their awareness of the unique ecosystems that we have in this country.
Thanks, Tony. That's really good. And look, another question. Is this work being done elsewhere in the world, the Science Saving Rainforests project?
Not that we're aware of. The last number I saw was that only about 500 species of plants had their genomes comprehensively analysed. So if we're adding 60, that's a 10% increase or 12% increase in this branch of science. So the answer is no. As far as we're aware, this is not happening. It's also got widespread implications. Sarah had a conference in Brisbane a couple of years ago, and for that conference, Big Scrub Land Care put on a tour for those participants who were interested. And amongst those was a young Chinese lady, and we showed her just out here in the front of my house the restoration job that we've done, and she walked in there and was just stunned. And then I talked to her about the genome project, and it was like a light bulb going off. She said, look, I'm going back to China next year, and I'm going to be in charge of a huge reforestation program. And I think what they've been doing up to date is getting a couple of individuals, cloning them cheaply, and then planting them. And based on your concept, they won't survive in the long term. So she said, what I'm going to go back and do is to get a bit of species diversity, but more particularly in each of those species, do what you're doing so that we get the best genetic diversity, in the hope that that will greatly lengthen the longevity of these reforestation programs.
Thanks, Tony. And in the genome project, are the species limited to those occurring in the Big Scrub, or might they occur elsewhere?
Oh no, well, they, as I say, some of them have a range from the Illawarra to the wet tropics. So they're very widespread species. We're mainly concentrating, as I say, on key structural species, mostly canopy, but a few mid-story species, most of them mature phase species, obviously. Yeah, and if somebody in Noosa or Maribor or anywhere wants to restore rainforest, they can then talk to the Botanic Garden and say, hey, for our particular area, what would be the populations or individuals where we should get the propagules from and propagate those, because this is quite flexible. It's part of the Garden's Restore and Renew program, which applies to a whole lot of ecosystems, not just rainforest.
Terrific. Another question is how much threat is the ongoing subdivision of farmland into hobby farms and rural residential development? Is there a connection?
That's not a problem around here. What's been happening over recent years, Tina, is the cutting up to mainly 100 acre lots, that occurred in the 1880s, prior to closer settlement. So people are tending, a great supporter of ours, for example, he's re-aggregating rainforest. He's buying up more than one property. I don't know, he would have planted up probably hundreds of thousands of trees, this guy. So the trend is in fact in the other direction. There's very little cutting up because it's very hard to get DA through for subdividing farmland. So as I say, the trend is in the other direction, is towards aggregation. And there's a lot of, have you seen from the dreadful increase in house prices here, there's been a big influx of wealthy people, and many of them come here because they love the environment. And when we get the message across about what happened to the big scrub and how we're restoring it, and it's a great project and they should get involved, we engage quite a lot of them. So that's why the number of trees being planted each year has gone to these gigantic levels.
Great. Now, you hear often that the idea of improving the genetic diversity of planting stock is an essential component of any restoration project. Yet we actually don't know a hell of a lot about the genetics of this species in any of the regions. So I'm wondering how much of an example your project might be to other restoration projects across the rest of the country. How feasible is it for groups to undertake this work, particularly thinking of the expense, Tony? Is there a, Tony, is there, what sort of barriers are there to other groups taking this up in terms of the financial cost?
Money. Look,
how much?
Well, I guess this whole program will cost about $2 million from start to finish. And the Royal Botanic Gardens probably, their in-kind contribution is substantial because they wanted to support this because of its, innovations and its potential and good science reasons. But I don't think it's beyond the capacity of any group that gets organised and can raise some money. Hopefully, as this becomes more widespread, knowledge of it becomes more widespread, we might see governments putting a bit more money into this, because this is basically stopping a part of the extinction crisis that the country faces. Because all the threatened species are obviously threatened because they're already facing extinction. So it's a matter of galvanizing the politicians and trying to get some of the government resources redirected towards biodiversity conservation, and particularly looking at genetics, because that's the fundamental platform on which we need to build restoration programs. Great.
Thanks, Tony. And so that probably concludes, I'd say, our time for questions in the presentation. I wish you all the best with the project, Tony. I'm sure Arbor is right behind you all the way. And if there's anything we can do, please call out. We certainly will be sharing lots in this, the early part of the decade on ecosystem restoration, and the Big Scrub project is one of the flagships. So yeah, thank you very much, Tony, on behalf of AABR.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Great.
Your members, of course, will be the great implementers. So I hope that you guys take this on board and are as excited about this program as we are.
Great, thank you, Tian, and thank you, Tony. There were actually a couple more questions. Tamara and Danny had some questions. So, Tony, if it's okay, we might ask you, we might send those to you and ask you for a quick written response. Is that okay?
Yes, of course. I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you, and we'll put those up on the website. And also, just like to reflect on something Tony said about government funding. My background, I worked in government grant funding for many years, and we had discretionary funds for competitive projects worth, millions of dollars a year, a few millions a year. And COVID really showed that when governments want to, they can suddenly find billions of dollars. And so, all we need to do is to, I think, raise the idea that the risk of mass extinctions of species and ecosystems is as big a threat as COVID, and hopefully we might actually get some more money printed to do these sorts of projects. It was a constant frustration of mine that we did have so little money to actually put out in terms of new good ideas. And yeah, so thanks again, Tony and Tian. And we look forward to seeing how this project develops over the years, and also remind everyone to keep an eye out for the AABR video on the Big Scrub project that should be released in the next month or so.